All right, Danny, if you'd like to let folks in.
All right.
All right, I think we have everyone in the room. So thank you all for your patience there while we got everything smooth as butter, as they say. We are very excited to welcome Mercury Stardust into our space. I am just pulling up the wonderful bio here that I'd like to introduce her with. So, Mercury Stardust is a professional home maintenance technician, performer, and award-winning activist. Known widely as the Trans Handyman, her unique brand of compassionate education in the home repair space has earned her internet fame. With over 2.3 million followers on TikTok and over 301,000 followers on Instagram, Mercury spreads DIY knowledge with love. Her expertise includes rental maintenance, landlord negotiations, clogs, drywall, painting, minor electrical repairs, caulking, and more. In addition, Mercury Stardust and her team, in their second annual fundraising event, sorry, my screen did a little wonky thing there, recently raised an historic $2.3 million for the nonprofit Point of Pride, which is a trans-led 501c3 nonprofit that provides gender-affirming support to trans folks across the country and around the world. So thank you so very much for joining us. Welcome, Mercury, to the 2023 Virtual Rainbow Summit, and the floor is yours.
Well, hey there, hi. I hope everyone's doing really good. Thank you so much for having me. What a great intro. I'm here in my wonderful little studio in tropical Madison, Wisconsin. And it's a really wonderful day here in good old Wisconsin. But all that being said, I have a lot to go over. We're going to kind of talk about, how I became who I am, my background, other things that became the trans handyman, and then go into what it's like to be a trans lady in the world that is often not so friendly, and how I am able to persevere through all that. So first and foremost, for those who don't know too much about me, I grew up on a small northern Wisconsin farm. There was more cows on the farm than it was in the town I grew up in. It was 387 people, and we had about 400 cows. So pretty neck to neck, or teat to teat. But all that being said, we grew up in a town where everyone knew each other. The mayor was our next door neighbor, and he was also the town plumber. And our other neighbor was the town blacksmith, the town gunsman, and just everyone hated him. So, so we were a very connected community. Everyone kind of knows each other and knew each other. But because of that, when you live in an environment like that, when you are even a little bit different, if people get the smell of you being a little bit different, it can be the talk of the town. And even though I was a wee little kid at the time, about 6 or 7, people talked a lot about that femme little boy down the street. And I was always very different than my brothers, always very different than my cousins. I would much rather be, feeding the calves with little milk bottles than, doing any type of boyish things with my brothers. I love being around my mom. I loved being around all the other aunts and cousins. And that was just basically how I like to live my life. I connected more with women than I ever did with boys. But my dad sensed this really early on, and my dad made it his mission to try to get all the wimp out of me, in his own words. So my father, very early on in my life, dedicated his entire life to essentially man me up. So he enrolled me in something called T-ball. And for those who are not accustomed to T-ball, is when you have a stick where you put a ball on top of it and you hit the ball with another stick. And I was so bad, just to give you a picture, I was so bad at this that I had a hard time hitting the stick with the other stick. I would just barely graze the ball on occasion. But my dad just hated it. So he would take me home after practice, and he would make me run bases around our little family farm. He would set bases up, and I would just run. And he got so mad at me that he ran up behind me one night and stopped and started yelling at me and said, "Stop being a sissy." And he pushed me down on the ground and called me the F slur and a bunch of other things. And that's when our neighbor, the mayor, came out and saw it happen. And our other neighbor that no one really liked too much came out. And everyone knew that that was the household we had. But that was normalized. That was how you treated boys who were a little bit femme. And I learned very quickly that if I wanted to survive a father who felt that way in a neighborhood that supported that type of behavior, then I needed to find ways to blend. And I got really good at blending. And no, I'm not talking about my eyeshadow, even though I got real good at that eventually. I got really good at blending and pretending to be something that I'm not. And this is the crux of the whole story. I got really good at pretending to be a boy, so much that I sometimes lost myself. I didn't really necessarily like all the sports everyone talked about, but I had to be really well rehearsed in it. So that's when I got really good at stats and really good at knowing all the names and knowing every single player, every single team, and every single sports league, because I had to. I didn't really necessarily ever understand the ins and outs of, an I formation for the Green Bay Packers or a shotgun formation, but I knew the names. And that was pretty good. I could fake it pretty good that way. But it was always stressful. I felt like I was white knuckling it the entire childhood until I hit high school. See, when I grew up, in the time period that I grew up, the closest thing I got to any type of gay icon was Will and Grace, played by two straight guys. And we didn't have representation. We didn't really have a whole lot of understanding of our own identities. So when I hit high school, I knew that I liked boys, but I also liked girls. But I didn't know that if you liked boys, it didn't make you automatically gay. But I didn't understand that. I didn't know what bisexuality was. So I came out at the ripe old age at 16 years old in a small high school of 120 people that I was gay. And I was determined to be likable. I was determined to be palatable. I wanted to be everyone's best gay friend, and I wanted to be the only gay kid they ever met that they actually liked. I was hell-bent on being what we have now come to know, a pick-me. I was very good at, being everyone's favorite. I had a boyfriend in secret because he was closeted. I got really good at basketball, and I was actually eventually the captain of the basketball team. So that little kid who couldn't hit a stick with a stick could at least throw a ball in a hole. And I got really good doing all those things. But it was eating away at me because that wasn't who I was. I wasn't gay. I was bisexual. And I wasn't a boy. I was a woman, but I didn't have terminology. When I came out to my dad that I was gay, I somehow managed to be open to the entire high school and my teachers and my coaches and my friends. But my father was so oblivious to me and oblivious to my life and detached from my life. He didn't know for a year and a half. So when I eventually came out to my dad, he kicked me out of the house and called me the F slur and the T slur and all the things you could think about. And that same day, my best friend Dana came out to her dad as a lesbian. And she got kicked out of her house. So we decided at the age of 18 that I was going to spend my last year in high school living with Danny across the street from our high school at an apartment building. And there I was. I was on student council. I was an FFA. I was on a drama team, debate team, football, basketball, all the things. while also having a full-time job at McDonald's in order to pay the bills. It was a really stressful time in my life. And I often look back and go, I don't know how I got through it. But I do know that survival will make you do a lot of things. And I got really good at just not thinking about the hate. Then when I wanted to go to college, after that awful year of alone, detached from my own family, I was told by my mom, who's still in contact with me, that if I wanted to go to college and if I wanted her help, I had to reconnect with my dad. I had to forgive my dad. And this started the process of continuously forgiving my father for things he did against me without ever asking for an apology. So I did that. I just forgave my father and moved on, went to college down here in tropical Madison, Wisconsin, and went to pursue my degree. And the straightest thing I could ever think about, and that was musical theater. For a kid who was trying real hard to blend, college was awakening. I no longer had to worry about doing things that was maybe against the grain. I was just one person out of thousands of people who just wanted to be themselves and didn't necessarily think about what others were thinking. It was a freeing experience. But I also quickly understood that the program I was in was not for me. The lights and the sounds and all that stuff didn't do much for me. I didn't like necessarily plays and theater. But what I loved was the stage. And I felt at odds with that. But one night on Craigslist, I saw an ad from a man who was a drag queen, a world famous drag queen. He performed with RuPaul back in the 90s and he retired for years. And his name was CC Ray. And he put in the description on Craigslist, seeking attractive young male for performance opportunities. And me being a 20-year-old who didn't bat an eye at that, I went, yeah, okay. So I showed up and it was actually really wholesome. He was this really sweet man and he taught me a lot. And that started a friendship where he kind of treated me like a queer little kid coming up who didn't really have any ideas of who she was, and traveling around the country in a cabaret show with 3 other people in the back of a van. And we traveled to 126 different cities and 27 different states in the course of 5 years. But we only did that on the weekends. Thursday night, we would pack in the van. We would travel on Friday and Saturday, and we would go all over the place, but always be back by Monday because all of us had jobs. And I needed to get a job because this job was not paying crap at all. So I was reached out by a friend and they said, you know what? You're actually really good at fixing stuff. You're like really, you got a brain for it. I don't know why you got a brain for it, but you somehow like are just really good at fix it. Have you thought about being a maintenance technician? There's a job opening at this one place. And I was like, I don't really like tools. I don't like anything that's doing with boys. Get away. You know? But I was generally really good at fixing stuff because when I was growing up, one of the masking skills I had was knowing how to work with tools in my hands. So one of my survival techniques was to get better at doing handy stuff than everybody else. If I could do those things, I didn't have to worry about asking for help from people that might think of me differently. So I applied, I got the internship, and 4 months later, I became a full-time maintenance technician with honors. And I started doing that career that I didn't think I was going to have for 16 years. But I did. I fell in love with it. I didn't fall in love with the people. They were pretty awful to me. They reminded me every single day that I was different. I wasn't openly living my life as a trans woman, but they didn't have to see that. They saw a boy with mascara on sometimes who would come to work after doing a show or nail polish on. And they saw a difference. They could smell the blood in the water. So I was mistreated a lot those first couple of years, ridiculed and made fun of, and I never really was allowed to speak in the meetings because how could I ever contribute anything to a meeting? Until I started going and getting certification after certification after certification. See, while I was traveling around the country and performing, I was also reading a lot. I was reading every single book Bob Vila ever wrote. I read every single book I could get my hands on. I became obsessed with being better at everything that my peers thought they were better at. I run off of spite. We say that all the time here in the studio. I run off of spite. When people tell me that I can't do something, I pull my overalls up over my shoulders and I said, I bet you I can. And I did. I got really good at it. I got stupidly good, so much so that I was asked several times to go and apprentice for plumbers, electricians. And I always thought about it, but I loved being versatile. I loved being a general contractor. I loved doing things that was different every day. And it was also way easier for my schedule because what I really love to do is perform. And I did that. That was my life. That was a balance back and forth until one day a friend of mine told me that I was going to perform in a show with a trans woman. I never met a trans woman. I somehow performed in all these gay bars all across the country, and I never actually had a conversation with a trans woman face to face. And she comes in the dressing room, and it's just me and her. We're doing a 2-person show. That's it. She comes in the dressing room, and she is loud, so loud. And she was like, hello, honey. Oh, my God. It's so good to meet you. And her name was Cass Marie Domino. And she was a dynamite person, just an absolutely terrific human being. I met her and I fell in love with her quickly. Our friendship just blossomed so very fastly. And I would talk to her constantly. She was about 15 years my elder. And I would ask her every single question under the sun. I was just fascinated by her story. And then one night she said, you are so curious. Why are you so curious? And I said, I honestly don't know. I don't know. I don't really have a clue about your life. And I'm curious about your life, you know? And we talked a lot. And she talked about people who were bisexual and trans, people who were straight and trans, and people who were lesbians and trans. I never heard of this. I thought that trans women were gay men in dresses. That's what my narrow little mind from northern Wisconsin, who knew more cows than people, thought. So when this was starting to be introduced to me, I started reflecting on myself. This was the seed. This is what we would call my egg cracking. But it wasn't a big crack. It wasn't like we were making an almond. No, we were not making an almond at all. We accidentally dropped me on the floor and then tried to cover it up. I spent another couple of years trying to deal with the cracks. I didn't want the cracks to show. I was already too different. I was already weird enough, I would tell people. This can't be who I am. I liked tools. This can't be who I am. I don't want this. And one night, my spouse mouse, ZZ, came home from school because they were in grad school and they had to watch a documentary about a little girl who came out as trans around 8 years old. And we watched this documentary together and I was fascinated. I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. And after it got done, ZZ was like, what do you think? And I said, well, I'm a little bit confused. I mean, everyone feels that way. What she's feeling is that we all feel that way, right? Like we all want to be something that, we're not, right? And ZZ looked at me very complexed and said, no, that's not true. And I said, yeah, but I've always wanted to be a girl, but every person wants to be a girl, right? Like that would just be great. And ZZ was like, I don't want to be a girl. I want to be a boy. And there's this conversation back and forth. Where ZZ is trans masc non-binary and I'm trans femme. And our journeys, we came out about a week apart in 2018. We got married about a month before, took photos. We never show people because, whoops. And then we started our life together as us. And through that journey, I was very reluctant to take on what I believed to be stereotypes at first. I didn't want to shave my beard. I was really obsessed with my beard. And that was because it was covering up my dysphoria. There's parts of my body I didn't know I didn't like because I spent years trying to shape them in a way that I felt like were acceptable. And it wasn't until about 10 months in that I started doing HRT. And it wasn't until about a year or 2 years in when I was like, oh, wait, I want to actually do more with my transition. I don't want to just be stuck here all the time. But by that time, I had a weekly burlesque show, the only weekly burlesque show in the whole state of Wisconsin. And we had tons of people who came out as trans, including me on stage. And one night I was doing the show, and the way that I came out to people for the very first time was I hosted the entire show. And right at the very end, in front of the whole 6 people, I said, everyone, have a good night. Take care. By the way, I'm a lady, and walked off the stage. It was the most Midwest way you could ever come out. And my friends came around the corner, and my friends who were there outnumbered how many audience members we had. And they all hugged me. And it was this really beautiful moment. And I realized there, and that was what I wanted the show to be. By day, I fixed toilets. At night, I got all glammed up, wore tons of makeup on, and I became a huge icon in our little small town. I won Trans Activist of the Year. And I never kept my mouth shut after that point. But then COVID happened. And this very vibrant, beautiful life just kind of caved in, and I reverted back in myself. I lost my weekly show. I lost the connections to my community that became my family because my dad, at this point in my life, my mom had passed away about 15 years ago now. And my dad is the only connection I have left to my family. And my dad and I no longer talk, and we didn't talk then either. When I came out to my father, he actually responded to me, I'm thankful your mom's not here because this would have killed her. My father would then later on tell me that the worst day of his life was when I told him I was trans. Not when his wife of 37 years died, but when his child told him their truth. So there I was in the middle of COVID alone, very sad. And a job that I had held for years in maintenance, I was furloughed. The company was going under, and I was going with it. So I was looking for a new job. I had skills. I had so many skills, and I had a brand for all of it. I never thought for a moment it was going to be hard for me. A lot of the people that I worked with picked up jobs like that, and they had less degrees, less certifications, and less time doing the job. But I had made a decision early on that I was not going to hide who I was anymore. Partially because it got a little bit too hard. These knicker knockers are a little bit too hard to ignore. And to be honest, it's just too difficult not to be me. So for the first time in my life, in a professional sense, I came out. I told everyone in interviews and my resume that I was trans. I did not hide it. I wanted a job that would accept me for who I was and be proud to fly the flag just as much as I am. And that's when trouble brewed. I spent 4.5 months with a little savings we had, struggling, not finding a job while not knowing what was going to happen. And one day, out of the blue, I got a job offer. I had an interview, a 2-hour interview on the phone. And he was a technician that was about an hour out of Madison who was working with a retirement center. And he wanted me to be his apprentice, which was kind of insulting, but I didn't have many options. So I said, yeah, I would love to come and meet you in person. But he's like, no, 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 no. I want to give you the job. I want to give you the job right now. You are so qualified. I want to give you the job. So I said, okay, yeah, I'll come on Monday and I'll sign the papers and we'll do the job. So I traveled all the way down there, and about 15 minutes before I showed up, I gave him a call to make sure he was there. And I called and I said, hi, Greg, I'm going to be there in a little bit. And he was like, I'm so excited to meet you. And then I show up with a very beautiful sweater on, with my bun up in my hair like I do, and my purse around my neck, wearing practical shoes, but very much being who I am. And I walked into this place, and as soon as I walked in, every single person in that room made eye contact with each other, and then back at me, and then back at each other. Panic was in that room. And if you're a queer person, you know the look. You don't have to be told. You know what that looks like. You know what that feels like. And I knew I was in trouble. Right away, the administrative assistant came up to me and said, may I help you? And I said, I'm here to, tour with Greg, since I got the job as a technician. And she went back and forth with some people, and she came back and she's like, oh, you're here for the interview. And I said, no, I'm not here for the interview. I've already interviewed. I got the job. And she was like, oh, okay. And then she's like, you just go wait over there. And I waited. And I waited. 5 minutes turned into 10, 10 turned into 20, 20 turned into 45, 45 turned into an hour. Periodically, people would come by, try to chat a little bit with me, but they would always leave with this sense of, oh boy, they were almost sour. They felt bad for me, every single person, but they wouldn't tell me what was happening. And about an hour or so goes by, and eventually the VP of the company comes out. She's a nicer, well put together woman in her 40s, sits down next to me, and she was very polite, extremely polite. So polite, it would make you wonder why. She sits down next to me and she says, Greg, unfortunately, is not here today, and he won't be able to see you. I'm very sorry. I asked, well, does that mean that I don't know, I no longer have the job? And she's like, when Greg gets back, we'll talk about your interview. And then as I was leaving, she said to me, this isn't about you, this is about us. And anyone who's ever heard that phrase will know it's always about you. As soon as I walked out of the building, I don't think I've ever felt that much emotional bricks fell on top of me before. I cried harder than I think I've ever cried my entire life. I cried harder than the moment I found out my mom had passed away. It was the realization that I was no longer playing in the same playground, that everyone else was going to be in the nice one, and I was going to be in the one that had wood chips everywhere. And I just had to deal with it. It was the first time in my entire life I saw what it was really like to lose your privilege. I had lived my life as a cisgender boy, and I was no longer that. And people were going to perceive me how they wanted to perceive me and treat me how they wanted to treat me. And yes, there is recourse. Yes, this was not fair. Yes, this is discrimination. None of that matters in an at-will state where it can fire you without any hesitation. And none of that matters when you can't afford a lawyer and you can't afford the time. So I just kept on going. And then I took the job with the only other company that I had the choice to. And that was a company that had a 1.5 star rating on good old fashioned Google. and they were a property management company, the worst rated property management company in all of tropical Madison, Wisconsin. And I found out the job that I applied for, that I got the very day that I applied, had been vacant for 7 months. No one had taken this job. But I took it. I didn't have a choice. And then I fell in love with it. I hated my coworkers who would call the tenants animals and use derogatory terms I don't want to say here. But they would say awful things every day. And I was so afraid of saying anything out loud because of who I am. I was afraid of what they would say or what they were already saying behind my back. So I just kept my head down and I just kept working. And I fell in love with this community. A community largely, over 80% were BIPOC, Black and Indigenous people of color. And a large majority of the people that I took care of and I helped were immigrants or refugees. And I learned more from them than I think I've learned from anyone else my entire life. The stories I heard, the people that I talked to was absolutely beautiful. There was a woman by the name of Ella Brown. She lived in this little complex for over 26 years. And I know she lived there for 26 years because every single day that I saw Ella Brown, she would say, "My name is Ella Brown. I've been living here for 26 years. When are you going to paint my window?" She was very, very forceful and very beautiful. And there's people like her everywhere. And I found ways to bend the rules, to help people, to do more than I ever thought was possible, and use the skills that I once thought were awful as my superpower. But it wasn't always easy. It was difficult. Some tenants would say, "I don't want it in my house," and they would refuse me to enter. So I had to sometimes be okay with it. But for every single person who was awful, there was 10 who were not, who didn't care. They just wanted their sink repaired. They just wanted their garbage disposal to turn on, or they wanted someone to make sure their locks were good so they weren't going to have anyone break into their home. They cared more about that than they cared about who I was. So that's what I did for months during COVID. And then my weekly burlesque show came back, but in an online form. And someone told me in March of 2021, you should really think about doing TikTok, because that would be a really great way for you to get a new online audience for your burlesque show. And then I said, no one is going to watch that. No one is going to watch what will my videos be about? Drywall? So jokingly and begrudgingly, I started TikTok. And I was kind of dipping my feet in various different things. But on April 2nd of 2021, a woman had posted a video about trying to use a ratchet strap and not knowing how. And everyone who was in the comments and everyone who was stitching her video was pretty awful. So I got pretty upset. And earlier that day, I had broken a toilet and I got poop all over myself. That had been just awful. I used our work shower to clean off a little bit, and then I had spare clothes, and I'm in my car, and I'm like, oh, I hate everything. So I'm just scrolling, and I find this video, and I'm so fucking mad at these people that I'm like, you know what? I'm going to respond, and I'm going to show her some love, and I'm going to treat her the way that I was never treated when I was coming up in this industry. So I opened up my glove box in my car and I grabbed my ratchet strap and I turned on that camera and I opened the video by saying, "Hey there, hi, my name is Mercury Stardust. I'm an intersectional, trans, feminist maintenance lady." The worst tagline you have ever heard in your entire life. Half of the video was my introduction. But that was what I did. And I did that after video, after video, after video. And it responded to people. People liked it. That first video was seen by 650,000 people by the end of the night. And I had 20,000 followers by the next morning. I had about 50,000 by the end of the weekend. I had 100,000 by the next week, 200,000 a week after that, 500,000 before the month was out, and about 1 million within 3 months. It happened so quickly. And I just kept on making videos. Most of them are just crap. But it wasn't the quality of the video that mattered. It was the quality of the heart. Every single video, you could feel that I cared. You could feel the difference. All those years of being told who I was and what I needed to do and how I needed to be perceived was finally off my shoulders, and I got to be who I wanted to be and got to be me. And I started changing lives because I finally could relate to people the same way that I wanted them to relate to me when I was young. So I became the trans handyman. And within 4 months of being openly the trans handyman on the internet, I left my job and here I am now. I didn't know what I was getting myself into, but I'm extremely grateful for the journey that we have been on. And I live by one simple thing. And if I can try to fix it, I'm going to try to fix it. And we've done that with a lot of different things, and it ain't all just about drywall. Sometimes it's about people's minds. Sometimes it's about getting trans people the health care they need. And sometimes it's about making people feel a little bit more loved in a world that often makes us feel a little bit less loved. Thank you so much for having me. Now we can do the Q&A if you would like.
Thank you so very much. It is wonderful to just hear how all that came about for you with the rise to internet stardom. What a surprise to wake up it must have been the next morning to all of the traction and attention from really just an anger response after a really bad day.
Yeah. It was really wild. It's hard to, like, I knew it was taking off, but when I originally saw it taking off, it was like 2,000 people were following me. I had texted a friend being like, "Oh my God, 2,000 people! Oh my God!" I was like, "Wow, that's so cool!" And the next morning I wake up and I had 20,000. And to be honest, I had been a performer so long, it didn't faze me. I was like, okay, well, they like that. Let's give them what they like. Let's just keep doing these videos. And I think one of my next videos was one of the largest videos I ever did, and that was a door hinge video. And those kind of things just kept on happening. I just kept getting viral video after viral video, and all I was doing was just answering people's questions.
I've been watching our Discord to see if there's other questions coming in, and you've actually answered several of them just in telling your story. Though we do have one that's very regional here. We have someone who's asking, as you are from Wisconsin, what's your favorite cheese? Because of course we need to have a few of these silly ones in here. And we have another along the same line. Being from Wisconsin, what's your favorite to-go snack from the Quick Trip? So got a few Wisconsin people who are very curious about some regional flavor, shall we say?
Sharp cheddar, way to go. I mean, we want to keep it simple, like keep it nice and sharp. And then my to-go one would be that cheesy bread. The cheesy bread that has, that's real good. That zesty hit.
Snacks so tangy they bite you back, right? All right, thank you. We have another coming in, says, how do you manage to balance the well-being of yourself and the well-being of all of the young trans people that look up to you?
Ooh, that's a good one. Cats, a lot of cats. Honestly, I think we're all a little bit of kids inside, right? Like I think especially trans people, I think a lot of us get arrested development. Like we get in this point where it's really hard for as a trans person. I mean, me very much. One of my very good friends, Dylan Mulvaney, that many of you might know, same. We get into this point where we're kind of little kids in our own right? We never got to be who we wanted to be when we were little. We never got to explore ourselves. So a lot of it for me is connecting with kids the way that I want to be connected to right now. I want to be told that I'm pretty. I want to be told that I'm cool. I want to be told that it's going to be okay. And I think when we're the adults in the room, it's really important that it might be on fire outside, but when we walk in the room, it can't be. We have to be able to give them peace, because right now it's really scary. And I'm really happy that we're able to do that. And I, basically I built a house and everyone's living inside of it.
Okay, so we got another question for you. Here's the next one. So it says, hi, I'm an out non-binary industrial construction worker in rural Oregon, framing and general construction. That's in parentheses. I look up to you a lot. I've dealt with discrimination as well. How do you recommend going about passing better labor laws so people can stand against discrimination with less fear?
That is a really good question. And honestly, a little bit past my pay grade, right? But I will say this. One of the best ways that we can do it is for us as people who are already in this field, already possess the skills, already possess some type of it, is to not gatekeep for those behind us, right? And I really mean this. I think that for generations, queer people in trades, women in trades, tend to close the door as soon as we walk through it. And I think the way that we change laws is we change little bit by little bit mindset. And it won't happen overnight, and it might not happen in our generation. And we can get all the protection we want from a law standpoint, but we have to also normalize what it's like to treat people good. And you do that by getting enough of us in the field. And I think that, with me being public and me being who I am, I hope in 5 years, the trans handyman will hopefully be kind of obsolete, right? Like right now, it's almost, like I tell people, my existence is proof that there's a problem. The only reason I exist as a trans handyman is in response to the cruelty we get in this field, but also people who are seeking help from this field. And I think that over time, hopefully, with more of us being present online and in person, I think that's how you change that. I think that's how you get people to not discriminate against us.
All right, we have a couple more. I think, Danny, you're going to get the next one out of Discord.
Yeah, so this is a question from Ali. Have you dealt with imposter syndrome with your role as a trans handyman? If so, how have you dealt with that?
I want you to know, my production goblin, my wonderful assistant that does a lot of stuff with me, is right here next to me. And as soon as you said, have you dealt with imposter syndrome? They started laughing in the corner. Yeah, 100%. I say this a lot, and I know Basil has heard this a ton. I never knew that I was good at what I did. I never knew I was good at this until I started TikTok. And still when I had other professionals reach out and go, holy cow, what? Whoa, what? It started like, it was like for the first time, I didn't have to okay my ideas through a man. Right? Like I didn't have to get approval from somebody. I could just say what I'm thinking. And I've never done that in this entire field. So I'm still working through what it feels like to be okay with what I'm thinking rather than getting someone's approval of it. Do you know what I mean? Like it's hard when you spend 16 years or 14 years in this industry, and every single step you do, every single decision you make, it has to be run through a foreman, run through a team lead, run through a manager. And as someone who's openly different, they may just shut you down if your idea is weird, or they never heard of it before, or they've been doing this for 25 years. That's not how they want to do it, right? So it's very easy for you to internalize that type of, imposter syndrome. It's kind of a projection that other people gave me in a lot of ways. And now I'm kind of I'm learning that, I'm actually pretty good at this and I need to stop acting like I'm not, but I'm working on it.
All right, thank you. I think a lot of us have a lot of internalized imposter syndrome, particularly within the queer community, especially trans and non-binary folks who ask ourselves all the time, are we really who we are? So thank you for answering that. Sonia asks a question from a sister. And the question is, how do you build the confidence to be so unafraid about who you are?
Oh, that's a good one. And I think the answer to that one is community. We have talked about this a lot internally, but I think for me, the thing that got me where I am is not me. I did a lot of the work, don't get me wrong, but it's putting little pieces together around me, other people, from Black trans women around me, from the non-binary humans around me, from the other trans femme people around me, to just amazing people around me who do a lot of work of activism, but also like I'm not alone, right? We're all trans and non-binary. My whole chosen family is trans and non-binary. My closest people in my life are trans and non-binary. And that to me has made for a strong community. And you can do that whether it's in person or online. But when you have those connections, it's vital for us to water those. And as someone who spent a large time is getting lost in her jobs and lost in things, I can only be who I am if I water the plants around me, and that means my friends. And that means taking care of them. That means listening to them and not always feeling like I have to be the problem solver all the gosh darn time. It means sometimes all I need to do is listen and be there for them. And sometimes that doesn't mean I don't need to say anything. I just got to be present. And that's how I've been able to be so brave, because I've nurtured my friendships enough that when I've gone through hard times and I don't know how to speak, they speak for me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. I can definitely feel that. Like, yes. Molly has a question is, what has been challenging and what has been the most positive part of your rise into popularity or celebrity?
I think for me, it is constantly having people talk about me. It's very difficult to feel like you're always on the defensive from people, right? Even me, as I think a lot of everyone in here would probably consider me very wholesome, right? Well, there's a large group of people right now in the world who don't think trans people are wholesome. And there'll be every single waking moment of my life right now, it seems like there's someone else coming up with another excuse to find a way to hate me. And it can be really difficult. Like, being a trans person in the public eye also means that a lot of trans people don't have that public eye. And it can be really difficult for them to see someone who's operating in a space where sometimes I don't have to say I'm trans, right? Like, I can be successful and be handy, and I can show people who maybe hate us how to fix a door, right? And I think those kind of things can be really difficult sometimes. And I struggle with the weight of the responsibility of uplifting a trans community and doing things to support them, but also living my life and trying to disconnect from the world around us, right? Like, it could be difficult to feel like I always have to talk about every bill, every murder, every act of violence, every threat. It can be very difficult. Those realities are very heavy, and they are like a noose around my neck sometimes, because it's there even if I can't see it. And that weight really, really hangs on you.
Thank you. We have another here that just came up on our Zoom. Erin says, has social media helped you embrace your gender identity? I recently came out to my family as gender fluid, and if my experiences could help others find themselves or help them know that they're not alone and someone cares, I want to share it with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the very first people that I saw talk about their transitions publicly were people online, from YouTube to Instagram. The more diversity I got online, the more diverse thought I had in my head, right? One of the very first movies other than the documentary I watched with my spouse Mouse, was called Transformer. And it was about a trans femme person who was a professional body lifter before they transitioned. And I think right now we get more of that. Like at the time, it didn't feel like there was enough. Like before TikTok, it felt like we were really throttled. We really didn't get that in our ether. But now I feel like we just scroll through TikTok and we might see someone who relates to us we never thought we did before,
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. I think Danny, you mentioned that you have seen a few as well. Questions? You have a couple questions to field?
Yeah, we have two
Great.
questions that we can answer here. So the ask questions here. What advice do you have towards individuals who aspire to be allies of LGBT individuals or trans individuals, or just the community?
Yeah, absolutely. I tell people this all the time. The first thing you got to do is drop the term ally. We want accomplices and we want advocates, right? And what we want is people not to be passive, but active, right? I think right now for me, one of the hardest things is when people ask me, how you doing? Because my response is, what do you mean, how you doing? Like 490 anti-trans laws. Zoe Zephyr in Montana can't even speak at her, the House of Representatives that she serves when she got elected as a public figure because people decided they didn't want to hear her voice anymore because she wasn't saying what they wanted to hear, right? Like these are real, tangible things. It's hard for me sometimes to hear people talk about being an ally. We're way past ally, right? We need people to go door to door and knock for us. We need people to walk with us. We need people to go to the bathroom with us. We need people to do active work every day. When people are in our family or close proximity are talking badly about trans people or even microaggressions, we need to have people who are accomplishes and advocates speak on it immediately and shut it down. Start that communication. I can't have an honest, open discussion with someone that won't offend somebody because it's harder for me to have a nice, kind interaction with somebody who's actively saying that their opinion about trans people circumvent my reality living as a trans person. And that's very difficult. So we need accomplishes and we need advocates, and that means action over passive presence.
Anna, do you want to get that one in the chat? That's a great one.
I think there might be one I'm not seeing in the chat. So if you are and I'm not, go ahead and read it off because I've lost track of things.
So this
There's
is
a lot going on in there.
Yeah, this is a question from Jesse Gregg. This is a question from my 11-year-old trans kid. They want to know what you wanted to be before you discovered construction and handymanness.
Oh, this is a terrible answer, but this is true. A priest. I wanted to be a priest. Yeah, for real. My friends joke now because they're like, well, you kind of are a preacher in a lot of ways. But no, I grew up in a really Catholic family. And from the time I was about 8 years old, all the way until I was about 14, right before I came out as a queer kid, I wanted to be a priest. This is true, I went to priest summer camp. Like when I was a kid, I literally was trying to put in training to be a preacher when I was a kid. So yeah, that's what I want to do more than anything. Thank God that changed my mind.
That priest summer camp was a thing. You have now enlightened me to one more thing tonight.
Okay. So we got two more questions before we can wrap up. However you feel, how are you feeling over there, Mercury, in terms of asking this question? Not. I know you don't like that question. Okay.
We're doing great.
So the next question is, what advice do you have for trans and non-binary folks, particularly youth? And a lot of us here are program coordinators and educators, so this is kind of a great way for us to kind of give some advice here, or send along the message, who are discovering themselves or struggling with self-acceptance in this current political/social climate.
Ooh, I think the best answer I got here is one that I think we're still grappling with. You gotta go outside and you gotta touch the grass. And I know that in a lot of ways that sounds stupid and hard, but I'm telling you right now, you gotta be one with the things around you. And sometimes that means touching the grass. Sometimes that means that going for a car ride. Sometimes that means just being around your friends and not saying a word, but existing. And I'm telling you right now, the batteries we got are all running low. We're a semi truck going 4,089 miles across the country, and we are running on empty. And that can only be solved if we pull over to the side of the road, ask for help, and wait. And that's kind of where we are. And I think right now, the trans people have done enough, as much as they can do. We're trying to survive, right? We're just trying to live as trans and non-binary people, as queer people. It could be very difficult, right? Because like just us coming out is an act of survival. And then on top of that, it was like I've told this people who are outside of the queer experience sometimes, and I've told them, imagine going your entire life and you hating yourself your entire life. Everything when people see you a certain way, just imagine you hating yourself. And the moment you say, hey, everybody, this is who I am, all those people who loved you before start hating you. And that's kind of what it's like sometimes to be trans. You have all these people in the world who treat you fine before you come out. But as soon as you come out, you lose people you didn't really realize didn't like you, you know? So recharge those batteries and touch that grass.
If I could get that like quote put up on my wall, I would 100% do that. That is amazing. Thank you so much. So we got the last question, and this one actually comes from our moderator, myself. I have a screw that is stripped and I cannot take it out. What is your advice on getting that thing out? Because it is not coming out.
I want you to know that I've never seen Basil run so fast before. As soon as you asked the question, Basil was like, I gotta go get it. Oh, that's wonderful. You got the little Mr. Grips. Could you get the extractor for me?
Where is that?
I don't know what they are.
Oh, fuck.
They're behind me. Okay. We got some answers. Can you give me a rubber band?
Yes, like
Yeah. Okay. So here's I love that we just like went into chaos mode. This is why I call Basil my production goblin. Okay, good. So the thing that we want to do really quickly, the first thing is rubber band. If you stamp this in half and you put the rubber band right on where the screw is, when you put the Phillips screwdriver or the flathead into that same slot, this expands. It fills the gaps up. Often when you strip stuff on the screw, right, there's like little gaps that are happening. And when you're turning the Phillips or the flathead or the square bit or whatever you got inside that screw, they're missing parts. This is filling those missing parts. If that's not working, try doubling it up and doing it again. Okay, now if that's not working, you can even use Elmer's glue the top of it, let that dry, and then stick that the Phillips head, that will expand and you're making that spot. Now, none of this always works. I want to make it very clear, strip screws are not one for one always going to work. They are all over the place. If you have, can you grab the vice grip for me? If you have a screwdriver, the silver one. Hold on, I love you. There we go. Okay, if you have a little bit sticking out, you can use a vice grips like this to grab onto the head and just twist it out. You're basically just extending the arm. If that doesn't work, then you're going to get something called a bit extractor, and that goes into your drill, and that will carve a notch into it, and then you'll be able to grab it and sink into it and pull it out. So yeah, that's how you solve that problem. I think I just blew some minds. I see some minds that have been blown by all those answers.
Well, I will definitely be using that advice in the future. I can tell you with all of the things that are wrong living in a 100-year-old house, one definitely needs all of the tips that one can get. So thank you for that infinitely practical piece of advice after a wonderful conversation, answering our questions here. A lot of us in the room work with young folks. Several of us, the names that I recognize on the list are people within the LGBTQ community as well. So we have a cross-section here of queer educators who will be working with these young people, as well as our accomplices in this work, hopefully, because you are absolutely right. We are well past the point of allyship. So thank you so much for being with us tonight. Thank you so much for giving your wisdom to this room. We very much appreciate it. And everyone, what a fantastic way to end our second day of the 2023 Virtual Rainbow Summit. We will see you all tomorrow, bright and early for those of you on the West Coast, and in the afternoon for those of you on the East. So signing off. Have a great night.